The internet, as we know it, could change in a massive way forever. Multiple countries have been taking a look at how the internet functions, who the winners are, and who the losers are, and are looking into ways to change how it operates. This is a quick look into the debates going on, and how these proposed changes would affect you. First, there are two big debates going on in two different areas. Let's start with Section 230. In the US, where the majority of large tech platforms are based, there is a debate over Section 230, the fundamental part of the law that the internet is built on. Meanwhile, Australia and Canada are changing how to monetize links and move money from advertisers back into the pockets of domestic news media. Section 230 is a section of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. The basic gist is that a platform is not responsible for the content its users post, with notable exceptions. The problem with Section 230 is that it gives companies the right to moderate the content how they see fit, but doesn't say how to do it. Think of a post-it board. Imagine that the internet is a mall, and inside the mall is my cafe, where I sell coffees and allow people to use the public board. The board is my platform, kind of like Facebook. I get to choose what gets put onto the board, and importantly, I am not responsible for what is put on my board. So in a normal world, people could put up pictures of their pets, post their band's next concert date, and advertisement for piano lessons, or something else nice and normal. I'm not going to have a problem with any of this stuff, and I put up a set of rules that everyone has to follow, or they get banned from the board. The board gets people to stay in my cafe and purchase things, while giving people looking at the board a sense of community. This is essentially the Facebook model. People post things that their friends see, which gets them to stay on the site, and the longer people remain on the site, the more ads they can sell. Here's the debate over Section 230 explained in my cafe. Let's say, one day, someone puts up something horrible on the board, a ransom note for someone's dog. The real situations being discussed are darker than even this, but for now, let's go with it. As the owner of the board, I am not responsible for the ransom note, nor am I responsible for helping with the dog by law. This is the liberal part of the debate. What to do with people who post dangerous things like this? Am I, the cafe owner, responsible for the damage to people's lives brought onto by my board? Currently, no. As long as their ransom note doesn't explicitly violate the law, I have no incentive to help these people, and even if it does, I don't face any consequences for it. I just have to cooperate with authorities should they ask. The other side of the political spectrum has their own issues with Section 230. However, they want it removed rather than amended. Going back to my cafe, let's say someone puts up something on the board that explicitly violates my rule sheet. Come on, Chaz. I am within my rights to take it down, and it's up to me how to deal with the individual responsible. Without going into opinion, there are issues to both of these approaches. The liberal approach has the potential to consolidate tech further. Going back into the cafe. If I'm a chain cafe owner, meaning I have the money to put someone watching the board at all times for any problems, I can reasonably handle having to look for things that put people in harm's way. If I'm a small cafe with only one overworked barista, I cannot possibly think to handle this sort of compliance and will have to shut down my board, leading everyone who wants to put something up into the bigger cafes and effectively making it far more difficult for me to make a living, reducing the number of cafes available. And for completely different reasons, the conservative approach has the same potential to consolidate tech further. Back in the cafe, let's suppose I'm no longer protected by law over what gets put on the board. That means if someone puts up a "Kevin is a liar" note, I'm responsible for the libel that presents. In the current law, I as the board operator am protected from Kevin suing me over that note, and he's not likely to sue some individual over something small like that. In absence of the law, Kevin may be more likely to sue me, the board operator, for these comments, and I'd be responsible for it as the quote-unquote publisher of the note. So I'd be even more likely to take things off my board. Their proposal comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of the law and how the internet works entirely. Removing Section 230 would likely make bigger platforms the only ones able to weather the storm of navigating the new, unprotected landscape. Ironically, despite a perceived lack of freedom of speech being their main problem with the law as it stands, removing Section 230 could potentially chill lots of speech online. Okay, that's the debate in the US simplified. Now what about Australia and Canada? Australia passed a law on February 25th that requires Google and Facebook to pay for news content on their sites. The simplified version is that Facebook and Google have to pay for news publishers to include their content on their site. Google does this via their Google News Showcase program, and Facebook has just begun working out deals with publishers after removing all news content from Australian users earlier in the month. Canada announced that they were writing a similar law to Australia the same day that Facebook cut off news content in that country. Let's go back to my cafe to explain this. Let's say that people have begun to cut out articles from newspapers to put on my board. From my perspective as the board operator, I love this. I can advertise my board as having news, and reading the articles that are posted on the board keeps people in the cafe able to purchase my wares. From the newspaper side, this kind of works. They get the publicity of being on my board and having everyone talk about their work, but they only got paid for the one copy of the paper hanging from the board that everyone is reading, and often the ads are not part of the article crop that people post on the board. The notoriety is nice, but it ultimately doesn't keep the lights on. Enter the new Australian law. Now I have to make deals with the newspaper to have their content up on my board. I'm still getting the perks of having the news on my board, and the publishers now get a bit of payment back to keep producing content for everyone. The Australian model has its own problems too. The law in its current form only applies to Facebook and Google. And that's fine for now, because they both have the resources to pay for this kind of content. But it could be disastrous for sites that don't have the capital acquired yet to have to pay for this kind of content. It also assigns value to specific news publishers, which has the potential for abuse. Say, for example, some politician amends the law and includes more publications that favor their viewpoint and devaluates news publications that are opposed. Any system with the potential for abuse can be a problem in the wrong hands. Both debates included here are obviously oversimplified, and there is much more nuance to the issues at play here. Lots of people agree that things need to change and we have to solve the problems that we're working with. Whether it be misinformation, harmful content, safety, or even monetization, people are beginning to pitch solutions. The future of the internet is uncertain for now, but the future remains online, one way or another.